Tribes on location at Upad Towers in northwest London, and I'm joined by James Davis, CEO of Upad. And James, I thought it'd be really interesting to create a video about how to spot a potential rogue tenant. And I believe that kind of inexperienced landlords are actually quite vulnerable to this because many rogue tenants prefer to let through an inexperienced amateur landlord rather than going through the kind of more rigorous process that a letting agent might bring to bear. So are you of that opinion?
Yes, and I think there's a couple of things to note. Experience is really valuable in this space, and you do pick up on a vibe that just doesn't seem right. So having experience is obviously a given. You can find useful insights on PT about other people's experiences and what to look out for. But for me, all of this fits under the umbrella of buyer beware. But what to be aware of takes time to build up on what it means by that. But generally, the gut feel factor, if something just doesn't seem right, it seems too good to be true. We all get emails of that you've won a prize. You know, really? So do just look into things of whether it's too good to be true. And I think the other bit that makes people vulnerable is if their property has been on the market for a few weeks or indeed a few months, and maybe it's a quiet time of the year, whether it's sort of Christmas or the summer, and then you start getting a bit desperate and you just want to take that offer. And I can understand why people think, let's just take that offer because there's none out there. But 99.9% of the times, it is so much better to go with your gut feel and have an empty property than have the potential of having a bad tenant in play, where the cost and the hassle and the emotional factors you go through of trying to evict, and you know it's months because there's far less county courts available these days. It is far better to be patient and to listen to your gut instinct than rush into something. A couple of things I would look out for from a buyer beware bit is tenants that are willing to pay the 12 months rent up front, for example. It's like, why have they got that amount of money just sitting around, and why are they wanting to do that? If there's sharers, maybe there's 3 sharers, if one of them comes round your property and the other 2 haven't, and that person says, yep, we'll take it, actually you want the others to see it to make sure they like it as well, whether those 3 people have lived together before, but also you want to meet the other tenants that are moving into your property. The average property in the UK is worth approximately £250,000 and 400 and something in London. It's a big investment, and I'd rather get a gut feel of all the people that are going to live in the property rather than just the one. Forget the legislation bit for a factor in terms of right to rent checks that we should be doing. The fundamentals for me is I would much rather meet all the tenants that are going to move into the property rather than just the one. And also, finally, somebody who's willing to pay the asking price or above the asking price. I'm far more of wanting to take somebody who I think is a good tenant. Maybe it's below the asking price a bit. It's not as high as other offers that you've had, but it just seems a better fit. And I think we've talked earlier together, Vanessa, about the 80% rule. I'd rather have 80% or 90% of what I could get, but have a very good tenant, than having 100%, but actually, will they pay on time? Can they afford it in today's market where salaries aren't increasing at the same rate that rents are increasing? And I think there's a lot of reasons, in summary, that landlords should have that buyer beware stance when they're letting a place and make sure they're choosing a really good tenant rather than something that actually seems too good to be true, because history tells me it always is too good to be true.
Well, likewise in my experience, and on the 2 occasions I didn't listen to my personal gut instinct, it did turn out to be a delinquent tenant. And I think just to reference the cash up front, that can very often be a sign that they're looking to start a cannabis farm, and this is a real growing threat in the rental property industry, actually, that more and more tenants are coming along as fake tenants to get a property for cannabis.
And there's a few friends of mine that have gone down that route and found out to their detriment. We talked earlier about doing inspections of properties. You know, there's a lot of reasons why you should be an active landlord. Go with your gut instincts, do bi-monthly inspections, because if you don't, it's not just the fact your property is worth a lot of money, but to make things right again is such a huge amount of hassle, cost and time. It's really important to be on top of things and go with your gut feel rather than just what's on a piece of paper from a tenant referencing. Bring it to life, get to meet all the tenants, understand why they want to live in that property, that area, have they lived with the other tenants previously, and so forth.
One thing I found is that if I'm asking legitimate questions that I can ask as a landlord and the tenant takes some kind of offence to that, that to me is a red flag as well.
Big time. If somebody's cagey about sharing something that actually is fair and reasonable, that's an alarm bell from my perspective. Just to be a bit sort of out there, there's nothing wrong with asking to see your tenant's bank statements. Now, your referencing will show that what they earn. Your landlord's reference will tell you what their previous rent was. But in the age where there is a growth of unsecured debt, the average household in the UK has nearly 10k of unsecured debt now. You've got the growth of services that actually you don't know you're paying for. So I'm referring to things like Uber and Spotify and Deliveroo and so on, especially in London, that actually people get used to spending money through these apps, but never actually see the money coming out of their bank account because you're not taking money out of your wallet or purse for that. And to understand what people have got coming in terms of their take-home pay and what their other commitments are is really, really important. Now, there is a bit of a line about whether that's fair and reasonable or not, but I think increasingly, because of the growth of unsecured debt and these other tools that allow you to get a taxi, buy music and so on without actually money exchanging hands in the physical sense, I think there's more of a need to see tenants' bank statements than ever before.
I agree. Would you ever put a tenant's name into Google if you had a kind of feeling about that something, just wasn't quite right?
So you should do your due diligence on tenants. And it's the same in the employment world as well when you're taking on a new member of staff. You should build up an understanding of what they're like. And speaking to people that they've worked with before, there's an argument of going 2 landlords back because their current landlord may just want them out and say and give them a glowing reference, for example. But to understand what jobs they've got, when they say that they are, in fashion at a certain company, well, check out whether they actually do work there, for example, rather than just saying that that's what they do. But the internet is a very powerful tool, and it's quite a useful resource to build up some due diligence. And I go back to that gut feel factor of just being comfortable that that person is who or she says she is and doing the job that she is, and whether they've lived with these other people before. It's quite scary on Facebook how often people don't protect their profiles, and therefore you can see everything that they're doing. I've realised how you switch that bit off now, but it's really important to maybe have a look at that as well, just to build up an image of what your tenants are actually like, so you can make an informed decision rather than just what rent they're offering to pay for your property. There's a much bigger picture out there in today's market.
I agree, and actually part of that bigger picture is that we would also encourage all tenants to put the landlord's name into Google, because transparency is where there is healthy interaction, and hopefully the good tenants can find the good landlords and the rogue tenants will end up with the rogue landlords. And I know this is a big part of why you wanted to contribute to Property Tribes in terms of educating landlords and helping them to best practice, really.
Indeed. The landlord world is a bit of a minefield. There is new legislation coming out all the time, and there's also just best practice. We talked about smoke alarms earlier, and it's the burden of proof, not just that it works when a tenant moves in, but being able to prove that it was, should it go to court. And this best practice is really, really important. Clearly there's a wealth of information on Property Tribes about all of that, and it's why I spend 1 or 2 days a week doing webinars or short videos on how to conduct the perfect viewing, to do with legislation, making sure you get some of the deposit back if there's been damage, because it is a minefield, and I do think the 2 million landlords out there need educating on best practice. And you can learn yourself from on the job, but also use the wealth of information that's out there from people that experience, whether that's the learnings within Upad or indeed the information that is on PT.
Yeah, well, if you're interested to check out some of the Upad webinars, you can go to Upad website, and also we have alerts about them on the Property Tribes event listings as well. So you can click on the tab at the top of Property Tribes that says events to see if there's any Upad webinars coming up.